Welcome to a world of the eye-catching and the unexpected. The spiny fungi are amongst the most dramatic of any in their appearance.
Fungi with spines, as many of you will be quick to point out, is not a scientific or a mycological description. Fungi that carry their fertile hymeniums on spiny and toothy bits, long, short, regular, irregular, don't fall into any convenient pigeonholing. Most of them belong in what we call the Aphelophorales, fungi without gills. And they range from big, glamorous numbers like hericiums to little dinky jobs like stecherinums. One, at any rate, pretends that it's in that group, but is actually a jelly fungus, pseudohydnum, used to be known as tremelodon.
Delicate little shells, brownish grey to quite pallid in colour, grow on dead wood. They're gelatinous, and the fertile surface takes the form of tiny, glistening spines.
Many of the spiny fungi are not at all common, and to see some of the rarest of them, you really need to be making a trip to the Scottish Highlands. On the other hand, some of the most glamorous of them you can find in an English lowland beechwood. It is worth bearing in mind that many of these fungi are rare and vulnerable. They're on biodiversity action plans, red data lists, and they do need to be treated with care and respect. We could do worse than to start our quest for spiny fungi with one of the commonest that will be familiar to most of you, and that's hydnum.
Most authorities distinguish two United Kingdom species, the least common being Hydnum rufescens, with a salmon pink tinge to the cap colour. You're more likely to come across Hydnum ripandum, with its uniformly creamy fruit body. Both grow in mixed woodlands, and although superficially they look like agaric mushrooms, here the fertile hymenium is carried on spines. The stecherinums are diminutive cousins that grow on bits of wood, not always in their best state and easily overlooked. The commonest of the 5 UK species is Stecherinum bordottii in little shell-like brackets. Less common is the encrusting form Stecherinum ocraceum.
Why is it that some fungi produce their fertile surfaces on spines? Short answer is we don't know. Fungi have been around for millions of years, but because they are soft-bodied, they leave very few fossil records. We've got occasional single-celled fungi in tough capsules in Paleolithic rocks, and occasionally spores. But otherwise, we really haven't got a clue. In terms of the more primitive fungi that are around today, they're probably those films and skins that occur on bits of wood. But they're not terribly efficient. There's no protection for the spore-bearing surface against the elements, and unless they happen to be on the underside of a bit of wood, there's nowhere for the spores to fall to. So in evolutionary terms, fungi have first of all set out to develop an umbrella to protect the spore-bearing surface, and then to raise it up so that there is free space underneath it for the spores to fall into. We also need to keep in mind the difference between seeds and spores. Seeds carry the full genetic complement of chromosomes. They're fertile, they're ready for the off when they drop into the ground. Spores are different. They only carry half the complement of chromosomes, and they have to combine with another spore of opposite polarity before they can become fertile. Now, because there are no pollinators like bees for fungus spores, and because fungi don't have dating agencies, that can be a pretty chancy business. And it has to rely on big numbers. For every 100 seeds that a flowering plant produces, a fungus needs to produce more than 1 million spores to have the same chance of success. So fungi have had to develop various ways of increasing the area where the spores are produced. And they've done it by developing gills, tubes that open by pores, ridges, honeycombs, and in some instances spines, all with the same intention of increasing the surface area to produce the maximum number of spores.
Many of our native woodlands still contain a remarkable diversity of fungus species. One that grows with a rather blunt, tooth-like spiny hymenium is Radiolomyces molaris. It generally prefers to live on oak, forming a cushion on dead branches, typically high in the crown, and it's generally only seen on the ground after storm damage. Another that develops a distinctive, vibrant coloration is Tricaptum violaceum. Again, the spines are rather tooth-like and very small. Like Radiolomyces, it's an encrusting annual, but this one lives on dead and rotten wood of coniferous trees, favouring pine. We've one more little gem to include in our survey of spiny fungi, and this is Ariscalpium vulgare, the so-called earpick fungus. To find this one, you need to be searching buried and partly buried pine cones. It's tiny. The cap is at most 2 centimetres across, so it can be easily overlooked. The hericiums are in a different league, big and showy. And to find these species, the best places to be searching are beech woods. The most frequent of our UK-based quartet is Hericium serratum, which grows on dead and dying trunks in clusters of irregular, creamy caps, warty on the upper surface and with long pendulous spines below. The next most common, more compact but no less glorious to find, is Hericium erinaceus, which also prefers beech as its host. By far and away the most beautiful of the hericiums is the aptly named Hericium coralloides, but this is generally found growing on the wood of fir and spruce. In its young state it looks just like pure white coral. Unlike the first two species, this one develops its hymenium on spines hanging from forked branches that arise from a basal trunk. For another fungus that's a thrill to find, and can be decidedly showy, we need to move the search to apple trees.
Every once in a while you come across a species that you've spent half a lifetime looking for and never seen before, because it's that rare. The species which is growing on this apple tree, I think there are something like between 25 and 30 records for the whole of the UK going back to 1900s. So it's not exactly usual. One of the reasons that it's even rarer than it used to be is because it's a species that infects damaged tissue, knot holes, dead branches on old apple trees. And these days, of course, they don't grow old apple trees anymore, other than in very remote orchards that are unkept and possibly used as for sheep grazing. They all use modern small trees, young trees. This is something called Sarcodontia crocea. The example of it on this tree is not in brilliant condition. It's a little bit dry. We've come to Mid-Somerset near Yeovil to film it, but in its pristine condition it can look absolutely glorious. It's got these long yellowy spines hanging down, and it has a rather unpalatable smell to it. It's rather like sort of gone off apples somehow. But anyway, Sarcodontia crocea is one that if you do find it, you're pretty lucky.
Away from antiquated apple trees and returning to broadleaf woodlands, you may find just another treat.
The rarest of the hericiums that we find in the British Isles is one called dentipellis, literally toothed skin. There are only a very, very small number of records of it, and your best chance of seeing it, if at all, is in broadleafed and mixed woodlands in the south of England.
Although 8 species are recorded worldwide, just one is found in the UK, Dentipellis fragilis, and this is our 4th member of the Hericiaceae. On a smaller scale, you can see the similarities. Found most commonly on dead wood of beech and maple. We're also cheating slightly here and including a little number called Mucronella calva. It's actually a member of the Clivariaceae, but it grows as little hanging spines on rotten wood. However, if we're exploring the spiny fungi, it's time to turn to the largest genus numerically, the Hydnellums.
With the Hydnellums, you really have to be lucky. None of the species is that common, and for many of them you really have to be in pine woods in the Scottish Highlands. However, there is at least one species, Hydnellum concrescens, that you should be able to find, if you've got sharp enough eyes, in any lowland beechwood. Where we are here on the south coast, they've been recorded all the way from Devon to Kent, although the greatest concentration of them is in the New Forest. What they particularly like for life is well-drained, mossy banks, just like that one.
One of the characteristic features of Hydnellums is brown, warty spores, and so a brown hymeneum. But to find true Hydnellum country, we're heading north, to Scotland and Culbin Forest in Morayshire.
There are a couple of quite unusual things about Culbin Forest. One is its size. It is pretty big. It stretches 10 kilometres that way and about 2 kilometres that way. The other is the fact that it's got a microclimate. Just over there is the Moray Firth, and that means that it keeps a mild climate. So we get a fantastic range of fungi in these vast areas of pine woods.
We have 13 native species of Hydnellum recorded, and most of them are identified as Red Data and Biodiversity Action Plan species, which means they're protected and we should be handling them to a minimum extent. The fruit bodies are often well camouflaged in the heather. They can pop up singly, or they can occur in distinct rings. The bodies are quite tough, and so they can persist for a couple of weeks or more. And because the distinguishing features that separate them from other stipidate hydnums like phelodons are not immediately obvious, you need to check from all angles. One of the prettiest, though not necessarily the most dramatic, is Hydnum caerulleum, which, as its name suggests, develops that glorious sky blue coloration when at its best. But you need to be aware that the appearance of most of the Hydnellum species can change quite strikingly from young to old. Some, like Hydnellum ferrugineum, exude what are called gutation droplets when they're young and actively growing. The spines are still white because the spores haven't matured. How different the appearance of the same species when older. The most dramatic in appearance has to be young Hydnellum pecii, with blood-red gutation droplets in startling contrast to the white cup surface. With these two species, taste matters. Hydnellum ferrugineum is mild, Hydnellum pecii is hot and acrid. Again, it's important to be aware that there are marked differences in appearance from young to old. Colbin can be a treasure trove, but there are species here that may lead to confusion unless you examine them carefully. Hydnellum scribiculatum can look just like Hydnellum concrescens. It can be solitary, but sometimes it fruits in concrescent groups like this. Again, you need to keep in mind that appearances can be deceptive, particularly from young to old. This is older Hydnellum aurantiacum, radially wrinkled and ribbed with a paler margin.
There is a wee caveat wherever you happen to be searching. You need to check what's going on underneath when you find something that looks like a Hydnellum, because there is at least one species called Coltricia perennis, which is not that uncommon, but when you get underneath it, you find that it's got pores, not spines.
Phelodons look much like Hydnellums, but they produce transparent spores, and that affects their appearance underneath. This is Phelodon niger. And this, not dissimilar, is Phelodon confluens, which displays a more brownish-black pigmentation. Another phelodon found in coniferous forests is Phelodon tomentosus. Although you can come across stipidate hydnums more or less anywhere in these forests, because of the passage of people and animals, the fungi are often most concentrated beside the access roads and tracks.
You know, one of the fascinating things about field mycology is that you can spend 20 years, certainly that's my case, looking at fungi, and there are certain species that you never see, and then suddenly, out of the blue, there is one of them. And down at my feet is something that I haven't seen in a lifetime of looking for fungi, and that's called Bankera fuliginea alba. It's a real treat to find this at Colbin. It is pretty rare.
As bad timing would have it, when we visited Colbin Forest to record, the season had begun unusually early, and many species were a little past their best. You can see, however, why it's called Fuliginea alba, which means brown and white. Had we visited Colbin Forest a week or so earlier, this is the pristine condition in which we would have almost certainly have discovered Bankera fuliginea alba, with short white spines and a comparatively short thick stem. Lurking in spruce forests in other parts of the Highlands, like Inver, there is another Bankera species that you have to be very fortunate to come across, and this is Bankera violacens, one of our rarest fungi. But to find some of the giants of the spiny fungi, we could do worse than retrace our steps to Colbin Forest. This is Sarcodon squamosus with dramatically upturned dark brown scales and with a cap measuring up to 30 centimetres across, which makes it just about the biggest member of the genus. These are fantastic things. Sarcodons are really quite unusual. You find most of them up in Scotland in the Highlands. There are, I think, one species, possibly two, that you get in the south of England, but they really are lovely. They're dramatic to look at, and what's important about them is, although they look like a big mushroom on top, if you turn them over, they've got spines. They're what are called stipitate hydnums, so they're in a way related to that common hydnum that we get in the rest of the country, but there are about 4 or 5 different species up in the Highlands, really worth finding. They're rare, they're on protected lists, they're red data. Away from the Highlands, the species you're most likely to encounter is Sarcodon squamosus, with its scales much more tightly adpressed. This was recorded in the Forest of Dean. One of the things I love about sarcodons is that they are big and brash. At the same time, you can walk along a forest track and they're there nestling in the heather and you can almost miss them, like a grouse sort of lurking down there. But they are fantastic looking things. They're the biggest of the stipitate hydnums, and really, once you get your eye on them, they stand out. As bad timing would have it, when we visited Culbin Forest to record, the season had begun unusually early, and many species were a little past their best. You can see, however, why it's called Fuligineo alba, which means brown and white. Had we visited Culbin Forest a week or so earlier, this is the pristine condition in which we would have almost certainly have discovered Bankera Fuligineo alba, with short white spines and a comparatively short thick stem. Lurking in spruce forests in other parts of the Highlands, like Inver, there is another Bankera species that you have to be very fortunate to come across, and this is Bankera violaceans, one of our rarest fungi. But to find some of the giants of the spiny fungi, we could do worse than retrace our steps to Culbin Forest. Away from the highlands, the species you're most likely to encounter is Sarcodon squamosus, with its scales much more tightly adpressed. This was recorded in the Forest of Dean.